Hello, and welcome to Transforming Language Education, the vodcast series where we will talk about the future of teaching, inquiry, and advocacy in language education. I'm Jen Crawford.
And I'm Rob Philback. Please like or subscribe if you want to join us in helping to transform language education.
Hello, welcome. Welcome to Transforming Language Education. Today on the show, we're so excited to have Estella Chen. Estella is a graduate of our USC TESOL program. She's actually a two-time Rossier alum, graduate of our Global Executive EDD as well. She brings over 20 years as a language educator. She taught English at the university level in Taiwan for 8 years before shifting her focus to teaching Mandarin and through her startup Mandarin X, which we look forward to talking with her about. This is a first of a three-part series.
Yeah, Rob, we're so excited to have Estella. And part one, we're going to focus on Estella, on your path as an English teacher. In part two, we'll talk about your journey as a founder of Mandarin X. And finally, in part three, we'll talk a little bit more about some practical tips for creating digital content in language education.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Great. Welcome. Can't wait to get started. So why don't before talking about your experience as a teacher, maybe can you just share a little bit about your experience as a language learner, your own background and the languages that you interacted with growing up?
Well, I mean, from my background is quite multicultural because my grandma speaks Japanese. So I was immersed when I was a kid. It was Taiwanese dialect and then Japanese and definitely English. Oh no, Chinese is the third and then English. So I was just so used to like picking up the sounds, right? Because as a kid, and then you hear something and then you mimic, right? So it's so very easy. And I always tell people that it's definitely a benefit that you definitely have your kids immersed in two or at least two. So I always encourage parents here to have their kids learn the dialect, which is Taiwanese. Because for Taiwanese, we have more than 4 tones. Because usually if you speak Mandarin and then, well, that's the 4 tones. And then the fifth one is probably the neutral tone. Because that's not that obvious. But if you speak Taiwanese, that's definitely a lot more sounds that you can pick up. And then that's definitely help. I actually learned French a little bit. And I always use this example that when you say happy birthday, and Rob's birthday was last week. So in French, that's Joyeux anniversaire, right? So, but in Taiwanese, we have a sound that's just like, it's like you're going to to clear up your throat.
Yeah, guttural.
So right, so and they were like, how can you pronounce the h sound that accurate? I'm like, well, because I was picking up the sound when I was a kid from my grandma. Or also joyeux anniversaire. Joyeux is something like a cooking, some of the medicine, the Chinese medicine. And then my grandma would say, oh, 转油啊. That's similar, right? 转油啊 and joyeux. So when I actually use that example to explain a lot of sounds that you should mimic, or even when you're a kid, and then students here were, right, so we never thought about that. And I think speaking language is all about listening, right? And then practicing. And then so it's always input and output. So yeah, I'm glad that I have this such multicultural background. So it's just, for me, it's so very natural that, okay, English mode on, Taiwanese dialect on, and Chinese on. Even when I was in Beijing, because I used to have a company there, and then they speak just differently. I mean, just the accent. I'm sure that when you travel to England, right, or just central London, and then I'm always the one that, excuse me, and they're like, Miss America. So it's just the accent that I don't get it. So same in Beijing. So one time I was on the bus, and then the driver was yelling so very loud, like, you should just insert a coin. And back then that was like, not yet tapping the card or even now tapping the cell phone. But they were like, oh, just like the coins first, and then hop on when you hop on, and then I just yell back. I like I just don't understand. You don't need to yell. I just don't understand. Where are you from? Taiwan. Oh my God, it's Taiwan. You speak so much different. It's just the accent.
What a rich, thank you for that. What a rich language background that you bring. That's amazing. And you're obviously such a great language user of so many different languages and dialects. That's amazing. So we want to think about your experience in particular as an English teacher. So sort of how did you get then out of that rich, language landscape? How did you get exposed to English? And then sort of how did you develop your English language skills within that repertoire?
Well, it's because if you compare amongst the four of the languages that not actually four, like three, right? And then English kind of the fourth one. I was actually forced because my family thought that it's gonna be a promising language, right? It's like a lot of immigrants in the States, they now learn Chinese because they thought that Chinese is going to be the next promising language. Even in Arabic countries, so many people learning language for now because they can see that in 10 years. So I was like that. And then my mom actually was the key person who thought that, well, I think you should be teaching English for your career. So like, okay, well, I love languages. It's just not, well, back then, not particular, like which one is my favorite. Actually, I love to speak Japanese a lot because when you speak Japanese, you show the personality. It's more like, hi, so desu ne. Right? And it's just language contains a lot of the personalities. So I switched the personality when I switched to different languages. So back then I was really shy, and then I got bullied when I was a kid because I'm always tiny. Yeah, I'm always tiny. So I got bullied so very easy. So I don't like, to be very honest, I don't think that, learning language is a must. But my mom, especially, she was like, no, you gotta be there. So I was in the States when I was a kid and on and off. So, and then, just after so many years, and then I just chose to complete my master's degree back at USC, and then my doctoral again back at USC. I just feel like, well, I love English. And then, well, actually, it's a lot easier compared to Chinese. The Chinese characters are way too much. Because when I started to learn English, not just pick up, like learn the grammatical points and then sentence structures, I realized that it's way easier than Chinese because of the character itself. It's just too much. And then, when I was having my elementary schools here, most of the time we spent is just writing the characters. And then that's no fun. That's no fun at all. But in the States, that's fun because, you speak the language and then you play. And then I can recall that, say, in like 30 minutes for a class, we can just, do, even I can recall that I just draw apples for a math class. But in Taiwan, it was like, oh, God, it's just different. But now I accept that, just the difference. Nothing else. It's just different.
That's amazing. Well, maybe you could talk a little bit more. So your mom inspired you to get into teaching, English teaching particularly. Right. And I share that with you. My mother inspired me to get into teaching as well. But how did you, what was your initial, you came to the Matt Teasel program here. What was sort of some of your initial experiences in English teaching, or maybe even what motivated you to pursue the master's in Teasel here?
Well, in Taiwan, if you want to teach at the university level or even any cram schools that we say, just prep schools, you don't really need to have a TESOL degree. Well, it's all about like relevant. But in Taiwan, people do care more about certificates that is issued from the Ministry of Education. For me, like I said, because the States, it's sort of my second home. And I feel like if I wanted to, well, actually thinking of, going to London or going back to LA. And just some of the experiences that I had when I was a teenager. I was in Cambridge or Oxford. I didn't remember. And then the teachers there were, like I said, the personality I like is actually more like open-minded or more huggy, right? So yeah, I chose LA. It's all because that, and the weather is a lot better. And USC is a good school. It's actually kind of one of my dream schools. I was thinking of going to Harvard because my cousins went to Harvard, MIT, but my mom was like, no, it's too cold. You won't survive. Just go to West Coast. That's easier. And I'm like, yeah. So, but all
great.
jokes aside, it's like, but when I was actually in the program, I definitely experienced a lot more, like my childhood memories. It just, all memories were all back and then feeling like, yeah, I want to bring that kind of joyful learning experience back to Taiwan to my students. So when I was conducting lessons or even courses at the university that I used to employed for, students love that because being a university teacher, you don't really have that much room, right? To do a lot of experiments on A or B or C. But for my students, I actually videotaped them a lot when I was doing the simulated job interviews. And then they were like, wow, this is nice. I even took my students to a movie theater to just watch the movie. And then, and then we just do something fun. But I was lucky. My university was supportive because it's a public university.
Yeah.
Right.
So Estella, you have clearly just a really long, rich career, and a lot of your university level English teaching you did in Taiwan. Just fast forward to today, because some of our listeners might be venturing out as English teachers for the first time, or they might be early in their career. They might be interested in what's happening in Taiwan. Can you just sort of, what's happening there now? What is the state of English language education in Taiwan? I know that's a big question, but
right, it's big. It's like,
but how has it changed?
Well, nothing really changed a lot ever since I came back. Well, I've been staying in Taiwan for 3 years during the pandemic. But definitely before that, it's always like the formal education, which students would go from the kindergarten all the way to the university. That's just all the stages of the schools. And then the other channel is the informal ones, which I just mentioned, the prep school, or even for now, a lot of people learn from the online platforms. And there are just so many online platforms now in Taiwan. But the teachers up on there, they're usually not professors. They don't really have the experience teaching at the university or even have the formal education as I used to have at the USC. We've been coached, right? And then we have a lot of methodologies that we know, or even just even I know how to conduct teaching practicum and guide students through. But I think it is what it is. It's now just a lot of influencers. They were up on. So I would say it's a lot easier for people who wanted to teach English, or they just want to teach. But well, I consider myself as a scholar and a professor, right? And then I sometimes feel like they don't really have step by step fundamental guidance.
Yeah.
Like they don't know how to work on a curriculum. They just try to put, they thought that would help for the students to, but by using their own experience. Say one of the YouTuber, she's very famous in Silicon Valley, and then she got more than 1,000 million followers. So she shared how she prepared for the TOEFL. It's not T, it's what was that, GRE, for people who wanted to get a GMAT, right? GMAT, right? GMAT. So she shared everything, that how she prepared, and then actually went through that exam. So, and then yeah, she just turned out to be very famous teaching English worldwide.
Well, you're really,
Taiwan is, it's kind of like that now.
yeah. But no, you're, you're really pointing out the fact that there are so many different opportunities,
Right.
and there have been for a long time in terms of the language teaching field, and yet just how we can set ourselves apart and serve our students better if we do have a framework and a rigorous background and the understanding of, how to facilitate effective learning teaching. And so we're actually really excited to talk with you in our coming episodes to kind of learn more about that. This is actually a nice segue, because in our next episode, we do want to hear about how you put some of that experience and educational training together to create something new in Mandarin X. So we'll look forward to hearing more about that there. But for now, I think we just, really thank you for your insights, and such a fascinating language background and path for you in, your movement into this exciting field.
Yeah, such an inspiration. Thank you so much, Estella.
Thank you.
I'm Jen. This is Rob, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.